Hi, and welcome to this week's study of theology. This week we're going to concentrate on, or rather we're going to begin our study on the nature and origins of man. How did we get here? How did something so complicated as this actually arrive on the planet? Did we arrive just like this? Or did we evolve from something smaller? What does the Bible say about where man came from? Genesis chapter 1 tells of all the story of creation of everything. And then when we get down to verse 27, it says, "So God created man in his own image. And in the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." So God created us. Many theories have been put forth to determine, or rather to make a reconciliation perhaps between science and the Bible. Many theologians have given up the idea that the Bible can be interpreted just literally as it says. And so they've came up with several different ways of using them, or rather several different ways of reconciling what the Bible has to say with what science has to say. In my personal opinion, that's unnecessary. First of all, if you say that science is right, and say we took billions of years to evolve, and we evolved over all this time, piece by piece, little bit after little bit, mutation after mutation, and somehow we arrived at this point. In my personal opinion, that's not exactly what science says. True science, that is observing the natural world, will confirm everything that the Bible has to say. So in my personal opinion, it's unnecessary to come up with some new way of reconciling what the Bible has to say. However, people have done it over time. So the purpose of this video is to show you some of the different, and to discuss some of the different theories as to how theologians have tried to reconcile it. One of them, for instance, one of the ways is the gap theory. The gap theory asserts that there is a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And Genesis 1:2 says, "The earth was without form and void." The gap theory, which was mainly the main person who was the main proponent of it, rather, was C.I. Scofield, among several other dispensational theologians. But C.I. Scofield is the most famous. And he put forth this idea that what if there was a gap between Genesis 1 and 2? When God said, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," and that was a whole heavens and the earth, and then he had to destroy it for one reason or another, and then he created something new. Well, the problem with that is the plain reading of the text doesn't show that. The plain reading of the text would say that the words, the heavens and the earth were without form and void, we're speaking of the same heavens and earth that were being spoken of in Genesis 1:1. Another idea is that what if we inserted millions of years and just allowed God to be the part that pushed it along, using evolutionary processes to create the heavens and the earth and everything that's around us? Well, the problem with that is it kind of ignores, again, the reading of the text of Genesis 1. Let me give you an example. In order for theistic evolution to work, then there has to be long periods of time instead of literal 24-hour days. And if you notice in the reading of Genesis 1, what you have is this repeated phrase over and over again. "And there was evening and there was morning on the first day." It's Genesis 1:5. In Genesis 1:8, "And there was evening and there was morning on the second day." In Genesis 1:13, "And there was evening and there was morning on the third day." It seems from the reading of the text that we're speaking of alternating cycles of light and dark, which we have named day and night. Not really are we talking about long periods of time or prophetic periods in history. Another problem is the order of the days. If you say that Genesis 1 speaks of long days instead of literal days, it is the order in which things are created. For instance, you've got in Genesis 1 on day 4, there is a let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, this is verse 14, that separate the day from the night. This was God creating the sun. If God created the sun on day 4, then how could the plants survive for long periods of time that were created a couple of days ahead? What about insects? Those weren't created until later. How did the plants get pollinated for those millions of years of time before the insects arrived to pollinate them? So there's a few problems with the idea of inserting long periods of time, not the least of which is the creation of man. Man, there's nothing at all about the text to say that man was created over long periods. The text about creating man is found in Genesis 1 verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish in the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." This was not a long period of time. If you read on forward, on through Genesis 1, you find that God created man and then began to talk to him and have a relationship with him. This couldn't possibly have been just long periods. So some people have postulated the idea of having theistic evolution with allowance for special creation of man. In other words, theistic evolution, but when it came to man, God simply inserted man in evolutionary history. Does that really make sense as well? Well, probably not when you come across the rest of it. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue over it." So if God created man to take care of the earth, why would he do that so late, after millions of years of the earth being here? So the purpose of man was to take care of God's creation and to worship God, but he didn't start doing that until millions of years after the creation had started. It doesn't seem to make sense. Well, what does seem to make sense is a more literal view. That's the view that I hold. I believe that the 6 days of creation and the 7th day that we were rested were literally 6 literal days of creation, and that's how man got here. Man didn't get here because God used a long process or even accidentally. Man had a special purpose in God's plan. We are the image and likeness of our Father in heaven. That's why we're so precious to him. And in your classes this week, in your discussion boards this week, please keep in mind that your classmates, you, your children, we're the image bearers of God. And that makes us special in his creation. That's why we as Christians have to stand against certain things, such as abortion or euthanasia. That's why we as Christians have to work hard to work with our fellow man. Why we have to help those who need help. Because those are just as much the image bearers of God as you and I are. So this week, take the time to remember where you came from and how you got here. You'll be studying some of the different theories. And I want you to pay attention to the different theories, but remember what the truth is of Scripture, that God created the heavens and the earth. So this week, take the time to understand what the truth is of Scripture, that didn't happen by accident, not even over millions of years, but God intentionally created mankind and placed him on earth with purpose. And so God has a purpose for your life as well.